Welcome to the Cryptozoology Show, Lochness Monster Part 14. Water dragons and sea monsters. We're going to cover some strange water dragons from random lakes and ocean sea monster carcasses and early descriptions of some sea serpents and things. This is a bit of a different show. I got some very unusual finds out there that I'm going to show some skeptics and things like that, like the answers that they're giving and things like that, how these things are extremely improbable, right? And sort of things like that. And we're going to cover some bizarre, really unknown little sort of ones out there. And a wild attack of a sea monster on a girl from Rhode Island that has got to be like it was a horrific experience for them, and I fully can understand why the girl was terrified out of her mind and all that sort of stuff like that. And when we'll talk about this Mr. Machismo coming to the rescue, and the whole thing is it's a magnificent story of epic proportions. I just love it. I would love to interview these people because they're just magnificent. But there's a lot of strange ones out there that are not sort of fitting into sort of where you could say it was a whale or this or that. I'm going to talk about one on the fence that a lot of people talk about, the famous 77 carcass and the ones Japanese that picked up in New Zealand and some different ones, but uh, I'm going to talk about some here that are quite interesting, and there's some strange things out there, certainly. And I mean, there's living dinosaurs. So this plesiosaur here, a plesiosaur there, fighting with the giant mini munchkin squid down there. He could be in big trouble. Those squids are pretty tough there, from what I showed you in some other shows. Oh, and I have an update on the megladon one. I had gotten some other pictures just to give you even a better idea about the true size of this titanic unknown species of shark. He's so huge that he's too outsized, like even for gigantism or anything. It's hard to believe that he's a known species unless he's megalodon. So it's one of the most intriguing films. It's not fake. It was actually a Japanese sort of research scientific study group. It's quite legitimate. So it's one of these ones that, yeah, you know what I mean? The skeptics will go on and on. And in fact, I'm going to show you a really fantastic carcass that I could just love to hear the skeptics answer. But I have an old one that some guy found in some old archives way back in the, probably this might have been taken 1930s or 20s or something. I can't decipher all their language and understand what they're saying, so it's sad, but nevertheless, it's the most fascinating near one I've near ever seen, and the closest to what you would call a real dragon. And I, because of my sort of full belief that these things existed in the past, right? But dragons were many things. Like I said, they could have been anything from a brontosaurus like thing, a triceratops, to a real Chinese like dragon. There was those kinds, and this is actually one of them that we're going to cover. And I challenge any sort of skeptic to come up with a whale or to say it was a seal, or that it was rotted somehow and this and that. This is the most hogwashian thing when you see this carcass. It's one of the best ones out there in human history. Even though it's an extremely old photo, it is in such great detail that it is impossible to say that it was other things. It only matches a sort of prehistoric dinosaurian like sort of thing here. So that this is what's and it looks very much like a lot of the early descriptions of dragons in some areas, right? So this is the thing is so we'll cover that one and a bunch of other fascinating sort of cryptids, and we have an update on the Lochness monster at the end there. We'll save for the end. So if you're not in the mood for the Lochness monster, but it sort of will warn you he's coming, and then you can run away if you want. But We have that and a bunch of other different, like interesting carcasses that you might not have ever seen that will go through full analysis here and show you that the whale explanation or some of the other things is extremely weak to say the least. And that science constantly does this all the time. It's a very common thing where if they can't give an explanation, they'll just pick one that works. So they'll give explanation that something was a minke whale, yet the creature was 95 feet long, and they'll just discount the measurements. They'll say they must have been mistaken. So these kinds of things, so because they don't want to, nobody wants to put on paper it was a dinosaur because they know then critics will start slamming them unless they can 100% categorically prove this, right? So what a lot of them will do is they'll just sort of, you know what I mean, get rid of the problem by simply that. And it's interesting how it works, but I mean that's the facts, right? So I mean, well, you'll see a lot of interesting ones here and some really strange lake monsters that are sort of interesting. I don't have much information about a few of them because it's extremely remote areas, but they're interesting, eh? And they certainly have some interesting sort of validity to them, where there might be something to them. And we'll cover that and some other sort of weird sort of things, carcasses, and a real sea monster film at the end that is absolutely astonishing. It's definitely in the top, probably 5 worldwide greatest films of what you would call a sort of giant eel-like monster or some kind of similar serpent-like thing, a dragonish water serpent, you know, any of this sorts, right? So you'll see that later. Absolutely fascinating. So we'll start on with this. Uh, Here, Lake Arnell, Costa Rica. Who would think, right? Depths from 200 to 100 feet of low water. It sort of fluctuates or something. Now, get a load of this. The creature is described, he has dinosaur to cow-like a head with horns, right? So there he is. And apparently he'll swim around and sort of attack at you and this sort of thing. Very limited information on it. You know, all I know is he's floating around that lake somewhere. But I like the idea of him, right? And another one of these horn sort of ones, right? I find these fascinating, right? But there's an extremely strange cryptid. Most likely, even people that are quite familiar with cryptozoology might not have heard of this particular one, right? So, but the reports are extremely slim here, right? So. I'd like to meet a contact around there. That'd be fantastic. I'd like to see how many times this thing's been seen. But whatever he is, he's quite definitely interesting there. So he's got his sort of like, but I mean, it's weird. Like some are describing him dinosaurish, like, but yeah, you know what I mean. But a weird sort of cowish head sometimes, right? So I guess like depending on how he comes out of the water or whatever, I suppose. But interesting sort of a creature. I like the idea of him there. I wonder if he gives him a moo before he attacks you. So he's definitely an interesting one. Here, Bong Kong Long, the Naga water dragon, okay, and Thailand, reported for mass hundreds of years at least, anyways, and probably thousands that is known in the culture, of course, of this Naga, but this water dragon crocodile looking creature with horrendous teeth and strange boar to carp like nose that actually opens up. It looks almost like a giant carp's mouth opening up. Absolutely fascinating, and it has these 2 sensors on the front of it. I covered the creature in another sort of one, Fogonaga, right? But this is one of the bodies of water that it appears in, Bungkong Long. Okay, so it's a lake, and it's in this remote sort of region there. But the film that I cover in the other one is probably one of the water systems off of it or something, I would imagine. But it's apparently known all through this sort of area, so I don't think it necessarily lives in only just one particular water. But this is what he looks like, and I mean, he's absolutely the most fascinating sort of thing. When I first saw it the first time for 5 seconds, I said, "Oh, this got to be a robot or something," but it really isn't. It really is a sort of unknown, sort of crocodilian-like sort of creature that is a dragon. Sort of, he looks. Anyone would call him a dragon, right? Because he's very different from a crocodile and alligator in a lot of ways, and sort of like the whole thing about him is he has the most terrifying teeth, if that's what they are, that you could ever possibly imagine. So check out what show did I even put that on? Oh yeah, the it's the one with the different sort of I think it's either ones where I covered just some different movies that you could watch of lake monsters or stuff, or it's the one after that. I was gonna check again. I do so many of these, and sometimes and a couple I've even mentioned twice in different shows, different things about them and things like that. But anyways, it's on one of my other sort of shows there. And if you see the one, it'll have like the Mekong sort of a serpent on it from the Yangtze a serpent that's on it that was filmed, and a couple other things that's on it there. And but I'm pretty sure it's the one where I talk about Forrest Gallant there, sort of, and because I mentioned about in the show that I was on this body of water for decades and had heard this story for, well, like several decades plus, of a giant sort of huge turtle that was in there that was mega exceptional, right? And even though it's by this place 10 trillion times, all of a sudden one day it was there, right? So the thing was true, and it really wasn't exaggerated outsize. This is the most titanic turtle I've ever seen. I mean, just unbelievable. But I put a picture of him up on that other sort of show. But on there I show you how that it can't be a rubber monster they're pulling, and the thing is really alive, whatever it is. And he even changes his sort of, he seems to possibly not only breathe air, but may have some kind of weird gill like structure on the side. Maybe he can do both. So whatever he is, he's a one of a kind, certainly most fascinating sort of monster. So if you want to go to Bung Hong Long Lake there, I'd imagine there's some kind of giant Chinese fish besides the water monster to come out and attack you. So, but anyways, if you've seen this thing, if you fell in the water, you would be more scared of him than Jaws. I mean, his teeth looks like even Jaws, like a punky. He looks like he's got like megalodonian sort of teeth, but more creepy looking. I mean, the most terrifying sort of face I've ever seen of a creature. But I also think he's sort of weirdly, whatever she is, this creature, like her, or whatever the case, like it's some kind of dragon. That's what they've called it for that. And so whatever it is, it may not be the responsibility for all dragon sightings, but it's certainly one of the water dragons that they mentioned. And there's old sort of drawings that are similar to what you're seeing on the sort of film. So it's an interesting one. So definitely check that one out. It's one of a kind there where there's too many things this creature does throughout the film, and it's so close. These people were nuts. They got pretty close to it in their canoe, and a bunch of things. And I can even show you like the measurements that obviously the creature's quite huge. He couldn't be less than 15 feet long, and maybe much longer, because some parts of his body's underneath, way hidden and things. But whatever the case, he's quite big. And so he sort of is not a crocodile. He has a front sort of strange thing on him and a bunch of stuff. So definitely check it out. He's very interesting and a highly credible sort of cryptid. So this Bung Hung Lung, as far as I can ascertain, actually exists, and he truly is one of the dragon-like things of ancient old, whatever he is, right? At the end of the day, he's definitely one of the ones that you would call a dragon, right? So absolutely, that's great stuff, though, that there actually is even one of these kinds still out there somewhere, right? But now let's cover this fascinating one here, the Gambo serpent. Okay, I love this kid. He was exactly like me as a boy there. He was fascinated by all this kinds of stuff, and he's going by this Bungalow Beach, right, and in Gambia. and he's going by this sort of this beach, and he's walking along with his dog, and then he sees this sort of creature, right? So being intelligent, he sort of was smart here, and he made sketchings of the thing and everything, okay, and he measured it. So here's the things, right? It can't be a whale right away because it doesn't. They don't have four sets of appendages like that, right? The creature's tail sort of tapers here. It's very sort of more alligatorish sort of body frame in that way, like some kind of sort of thing. It could be some weird, bizarre, primitive whale that actually has two extra sets of fins to it of some sort. But more likely, it's like, you know what I mean? It's some kind of serpentine sort of thing of some sort, right? It's definitely not. It couldn't be a sort of. Like it's eliminated for the whales of any of the known ones, at least, anyways. Okay, so that's one thing. But the tail sort of long tapering and the sort of and this very long sort of beak on it is similar to some sorts of whales or porpoises or things like that. But again, you have these problems with these fins here because this is a sketching of it being buried in the sand. The fins were still intact, they were just sort of yeah, buried into the sand in some of them, right? So, and the thing had 80 uniform conical teeth, which doesn't match up with sort of most of the sort of animals out there, sort of a thing like that. So that's another sort of issue of a lot of the marine sort of whales and stuff like that don't have that sort of count. And that sort of thing. And so, sadly, because you don't know what the teeth look like, you know what I mean? There's that sort of part. But the creature was actually, when he found it, showed no signs of decomposing, right? So he measured it, everything, but he didn't think of taking a sample off of it, and that was his one mistake, right? But you're young. But the thing is that that was like a magnificent. This kid did a great job, and I mean, if you're looking at this, it really doesn't match anything that I could humanly think of that would fit into this sort of thing, right? So he's certainly definitely one for the books of what you would call a probably unknown sort of sea carcass here, where it truly was an unknown animal, sort of, and not one that you can sort of base it on any sort of things. Like, I mean, there's so many things here. The creature wasn't rotted much yet. It had some kind of funny little ridge like thing up on the top of its back, extremely long sort of beak here. It could be some kind of unknown sort of primitive sort of whale, it might have been again, but with some kind of unusual extra sort of appendages to them, right? Sort of thing like that. And maybe they don't have an upper sort of any sort of fin structure, right? So it's feasible. It could be related to one. But it's funny though, you would have thought he would have seen, because he did sketches of the top air and he didn't see any sort of blowhole or anything like that, right? So, I mean, that's quite interesting. So, whatever it was, it certainly is none of the ones I can think of that you could blame this on him, because the kid was astute and marked the measurements, they'd be correct, and these sorts of the fin structure and all this sorts of stuff like that, and he did a teeth count of these conical teeth. And so then, sadly, these natives had chopped off the head of the beast and they sold it to a tourist, so that nobody knows whatever happened to it, right? And this tourist is long gone. So maybe this guy thinks he'd get in trouble, or just never heard that people are looking for this creature, right? But so that whatever he was certainly sort of an interesting sort of cryptid that I find has quite a bit of sort of good credibility to it, that likely this was not sort of something I could blame on a whale or any of the sorts of normal species of fish or these kinds of things. It doesn't sort of, it's not fitting in correctly with these sorts of things, right? So extremely interesting. But what it really was, that's it's too hard to guess. I mean, it could be some primitive sort of, you know, relative of some sort of thing, right? It could have been a relative of some kind of whale or something, but I mean, there's certainly some unusual things about it. So definitely be an unknown one, anyways, or there might be something like that in the fossil record, but I've not seen one exactly like that, so it's interesting anyway. I certainly would give it a higher sort of thing to it that is most likely was not something you can blame on any of the typical suspects. Now, here I love this story. This is fantastic. The Rhode Island monster, an interesting account of attack by a sea monster, happened to a Rachel Carney in Portsmouth's Seti Beach. She was attacked by a hissing, basketball-shaped headed sea serpent with an eel's body, while white underneath, and had scales on it with a basketball head and deadly fang-like teeth, maybe 15 feet long, and it hissed at her. So the poor girl was sort of on her back, from my understanding. So she was just floating around, drifting around, and all of a sudden, this head pops up, right, and he stuck his head quite a bit of a piece out of the sort of water, and he's staring at her, right, with these great big terrifying sort of eyes here, and inside his mouth was zillions of these round sort of, a ton of teeth there, circular like this. And this, so now here's the hilarious thing. So then this creature starts hissing at her. So she's about to have a nervous breakdown, a heart attack sort of idea here, right? So here comes her fiance, Herky Rock, and wait till you get a load of this guy. I'll show you a picture of them. They're just awesome stuff. I'd love to interview this couple. I just love this story. I fully believe them 100 billion%. So all the gang here, they were suntanning out, doing their thing and stuff like this. So Hercules, his method of saving her was slightly unusual. So Herky Rock comes out and he starts bolting towards her and the monster is circling around her and still hissing at her and going, and he's got his big clearing teeth sort of thing, right? And they're guessing it was probably about 15 feet long, this thing. So anyways, Hercules comes along, and what he does is he actually picks her up and starts sort of almost running with her, and then he chucks her, and then she goes flying back onto the beach, right? So then he's he's there, and the sea monster kept circling around him, and sort of, I mean, the most craziest thing you've ever heard, but here they are here. So this girl, man, I guarantee you this girl saw this, whatever it was, right? Okay. And I mean, absolutely, there's no doubt in my mind. I mean, she is literally in a psychotic panic, right? And I can't blame her. I mean, I would have been shaken up just as much, so I wouldn't have been any much more macho. Right? Although I would have done the same as him, but maybe not throw her. I think I would have just tried to keep running with her. but Herky Rock, here he comes. This guy, I love this guy. His accent, everything about him is just magnificent. A classic sort of, hero guy sort of dude. Herky Rock comes running out there, and you're hearing him, and he says, I couldn't believe it, this thing comes up and he's staring at me and with his giant fangs and all this kind of stuff. I mean, you got to watch this interview. It is one of the best things I've ever seen. I can't even describe it. It's so crazy. But there is no way in my mind that I believe that these two are lying, right? So, no matter what, I assure you that something that was like what they said, and both of them said separately because they're both being interviewed at the same time, but this all happened quickly, right? So they're being interviewed as this monster had just done this, right? Sort of thing. So the thing is that this guy not only corroborates everything she's saying, but the face on this guy, I'm telling you, man, this guy's telling the truth. So he actually really saved her from a sea monster. So, I mean, how many dudes could put that on their resume, eh? Talk about chivalry, right? But here's the thing. Now, some people suspect that it could have been some kind of eel or something like that. I have some issues with this, and here's the simple issues. Okay. An eel would come out for maybe a second or something like that, but wouldn't have a big rounded sort of basketball head like that. That's one issue. The eyeballs, she said, were sort of staring right at her, so it sounds more front wise, sort of that she's seeing them this way. But this thing had 10 zillion rounded, sort of lamprey like killer teeth inside, let's say, of this sort of thing. And with its weird basketballish head, but fully eel like body, and the thing was circling around them, right? So, him and her, like, once he chucked her onto the sand, then this thing started hissing and going around him, right? The other problem is an eel isn't going to stick his head out, feet out of the water. Like, I forgot what she said, but I mean, let's say it was face level with her, right? This thing was out of the water for quite a bit, hissing at her, right? So it's not possible it was a fish of some sort. That would have anything that, even if it made some weird splash that sounded like a hiss, the thing would have went down again. They can't stick their head up like vertical like that, sort of way high up in the air and just stare at you like that. The fish don't sort of work this way, right? So I highly in the highest probability these people did really actually see some, because I mean there's nothing that would match this at all. I mean you're talking a fully eel shape. The guy said he thought it was a great snake or an eel of some sort, right? So another what's weird about it is he's saying a great snake, right? The thing hissed at him. What if somehow some, yeah, you know what I mean, giant Burmese python or one of these sorts, like something of that sort of thing? Maybe it's got an odd sort of color to it, but it doesn't seem to match, like, because they're saying it had a rounded head like a basketball. You know, there his snake's head is, but I mean, at least that would be more feasible out of any of the sort of creatures out there of some kind of snake-like variety, right? Because of the hissing sound. But the teeth sound very outrageous, like wouldn't likely be from, like, because they just have like fangs. They're not going to have a circular mouth with tens, so like what the way she's describing them, right? And her Kirok hair, right? So I mean, anyways, I love this couple. I would love to interview them and buy them a beer. I mean, that's the greatest story in the world. And this this guy picks her up and saves her life from a ferocious sea monster. I love it. I mean, how can you beat that, man? So anyways, absolutely fascinating. But I mean, it can't. It sounds even non-snake like in a lot of ways here, the size of the head, because that's what they kept emphasizing, both of them, that it had a really round basketball like head, right? So now you couldn't see a seal or stuff like that, because then you would have a bunch of fatness behind it, but no, instantly the creature had a long eel like body, the rest of it, right? These terrorizing, horrid, circular, in a circle sort of lamprey eelish like terror teeth of big ones. Apparently they look pretty huge from the way they're describing them, right? So, and but the weird thing is the hissing, right? And oh, there was something else. I can't remember if it was that one or was it this one. Or there might have been something about something coming out of the creature's nose, like something shot out of the creature's nose, like mist or something, or water or some sort, right? So whatever this was, it sounds extremely weird and doesn't fit anything I could think of in the universe of the sort of. I mean, it certainly can't be a shark, and it's not any of the sort of, yeah, you know what I mean. It doesn't fit with anything really out there. I mean, a seal, you wouldn't make so many mistakes as that. I mean, these people were watching this thing as it's circling around them and terrorizing them, right? And they're close right up beside it, right? So I mean, yeah, you know. So anyways, definitely a believable sea monster attack of some strange creature that I can't explain. But I certainly like the idea of him. Can you imagine, eh? Like, but I mean, I just love the idea that this guy Hercule comes to the rescue and sort of. A great guy, anyways. That's great stuff. So, but Hero, I wanted to cover up a bit more about the Marianas Trench monster and show you in the other one here. Just to cover this a little bit sort of more here, look at this, just as I was saying, just his nose to barely back underneath where maybe his bottom chin would be. You almost got the length of a cage right there. I mean, absolutely crazy. Crazy, man. Crazy. I mean, this dude, look at his pectoral fin here, okay? Look at that compared. That thing probably is maybe even at least as wide, possibly a little bit wider, possibly a smidgen less, but in this sort of range. And I mean, absolutely astonishing. So could you imagine adding that like each time? Okay, and here he was again. There were the original sort of ones I was showing you, sort of stuff like that. Look, his gill sort of on this one's thing. And as I was showed you in the other previous shows, that's what I estimated that probably his gill line was near the width of a cage. That practically is near somewhere in that sort of range, close to it, right? So could you imagine? This is like, so let's say it's the low end of this 8 feet, right there, just to make you got like probably to make it past this or at the edge of his pectoral fin somewhere in this sort of range. Okay, at least 3 cages here, bare minimum, maybe 3.5, somewhere in there, sort of thing. And then you have to add sort of your pelvic and sort of anal fin, and then they have sharks have quite a longer sort of last section of the tail and the sort of caudal fin and that sort of thing. So wow. I mean, yeah, so if you got this sort of like let's say past this fin from there to there is somewhere around 30 feet, right? I mean, you got to double more plus this bare minimum sort of to probably, yeah, you know what I mean? So this dude could be 80, 90 feet long somewhere in there, like maybe. Yeah, possible. So, whatever the case, there's no way on earth I would believe it's less than, 60 some feet long and sort of thing like that. So, no matter what, he outsizes all of them. And this guy is the best proven boss of all sharks. He probably either is a true megalodon or some kind of relative of a sleeper sharks to Greenland sharkish sort of, some kind of ancient sort of one like that, and sort of thing possible, or some other kind of relative of a cargarden. Any of this sort of range is feasible, right? Because creatures can change in different habitats. They may get darker, lighter, so this sort of thing. This could be a other sort of one, even if it was a megalodon, it could be another one like it, but he certainly is in the megalodon size. So there, right in front of you, a true megalodonian sort of giant monster is out there, right? And alive. Next year we'll cover this famous monster was caught in the net off of New Zealand, blamed later to be a basking shark, and it weighed 1,000 kilos with a long neck and a smaller head. The carcass sadly was thrown back, right? So there was different sort of ones done on it, but none of them were conclusive, and some thought they were reminiscent to some of the things of a shark. So then the major theory was that it was a basking shark, right? But there is a few bizarre sort of problems that I have some issues with. Okay, I don't have a problem. It's feasible that it could be sort of some kind of a shark that is sort of, but there's some strange things that doesn't sort of add up. Where I'm more on the fence that it actually was some kind of unknown animal instead of a basking shark. Uh, Basking sharks usually way more than that. Even with it rotted, you would think it still would have weighed more. But nevertheless, besides all that, there's the main problem. If you look at the sort of creature's face here, the chin is equal on both parts down at the bottom, and the side here you can see where the puffed out eyeball would have been, sort of thing like that, right? And so the eyeballs in similar sort of area and things like that, but you cannot create extra length of chin now. So this is a problem here, and certainly the cartilage sort of stuff here would take longer to rot away than the flesh would. Okay, so that's one sort of weird sort of thing about it. Also, the fin structure seems a little bit further back, a little bit more than what a typical basking shark's would be, although the fin structure is similar, right? But here's some weird things though, is that up at the top you can actually see the spike ridge going all along across. Now that's the weird thing, because even if this decayed up at the top and somehow the neck got eaten away and somehow managed to thin down exclusively around the head and stuff, okay, there the the cartilage like stuff up at the top there wouldn't have these sort of like exactly like that with these ridges coming. So even if it busts it loose, it shouldn't look like that up at the top. So that's a bit weird there too. And also the head seems probably a bit small for sort of a like, even though it's half eaten away or whatever, that head looks still like so fully intact. The jaws are all still there. It's equal length of these basking sharks. As you can see, the lower jaw is quite a bit different. And so that's the sort of weird anomalies, right? But it's not enough to be conclusive as to say 100% sure that it isn't some strange sort of thing that went on, right? Or not. But so it always have to be on the fence for me, sort of. But I'm tend to more put it on the fact that it wasn't a basking shark than was, right? Sort of thing like that. So that's all I can say about that. But here's some very interesting things here. I just wanted to cover some interesting things here. Here's some ancient history books from massive hundreds of years ago, early Animalia books, right? Now, according to these, modern sort of people and everything like that, we're always sort of pitched to believe that dragons were imaginary and all these sorts of things like this. These things are sort of like absolutely bizarre where we've been trained this, because it's not reality. I mean, not even close. There's definitely sort of no feasible way that in massive sort of different sort of historians, earliest scientists from thousands of years ago, in every place, in every culture, the earliest sort of people, the earliest natives sort of mentioned these dragons. They called them serpents. It's the same creatures, different ones. They even depict ones that have flown, ones that lived in the water, horned serpents, which we'll talk about, that they already describe in a scientific book, massive hundreds of years ago, right? Sort of thing like this. And that it's extremely interesting that people have been sort of, in order for you to believe that, and I'll show you how he describes all kinds of creatures, that he's not really doing anything wrong here. There's nothing wrong with the description of them, and they're accurate in the general sense, right? And these sorts of things. So there's some very strange things here where this guy talks about like sea monsters that are already described and all kinds of things. And if you analyze this sort of stuff, I know a lot of people have sort of been trained to sort of think that it's imagination, but it can't be. It's not feasible. There's just too many sorts of different ones across the sort of globe here, from ancient Chinese and Japanese to the Swedes, to the Norwegians, to every sort of place you can humanly think of, from Africa to everywhere else, of mighty dragons that once lived across the lands, right? Sort of things like this. So it's impossible, and I mean impossible, that people all randomly could keep drawing the same sorts of animals in different cultures when they didn't meet each other. They couldn't sort of, the native chief guy living in Wyoming isn't going to know, you know what I mean, about Emperor Chung Fu Chao, that, you know what I mean, right? He's not going to, like, so it's not feasible, yet they draw the same sort of descriptions, tell you about the same sorts of similar size, sorts of things like that. And I'll actually show you a carcass of possibly one of these sorts that has sort of been described in the past. So, absolutely fascinating. But even though some of these they don't believe because these creatures don't exist anymore, there's still, a lot of sort of things to it where it's just impossible that this was completely made up. Like, who in their right mind is going to make giant books about the animals and creatures of the planet and make whole sections to imaginary sorts of monsters, right? I find this a ridiculous premise, right? Okay, so here's another one, the red serpent, the serpent of the sea, right? Okay, so he's quite interesting there, sort of a thing like that. Sort of reminds me a little bit of some sort of oarfishish like sort of thing, right? But he describes them. He says they're different forms, or like congors. There's different forms of them and things like that, and sort of goes in their sort of their lengths and their back and all kinds of different things. And so it's a very sort of interesting, and even tells you like what sort of parts of the sea and the oceans that they're in, and these sorts of things. So again, why does any people sort of doubt this when there actually has been sightings similar to this sort of look, right? And also that, you know what I mean, it's not really that massively unbelievable. It's just some kind of eel-like sort of serpent, right? Sort of thing that's definitely some sort of fish species, right? So, sort of thing like that, that's similar like to an oarfish or something like that, that maybe was more common back in those days and maybe now extinct or in low numbers or whatever, right? But definitely interesting. But now here's the things he says about dragons. There be some dragons which have wings and no feet. Some again have both feet and wings, and from neither, and some have neither feet nor wings, but are only distinguished from the common fort of serpents by the comb growing upon their heads and the beard underneath their cheeks. Saint Augustine, I think, a faith that dragons abide in deep caves and hollow places of the earth, and that sometimes when they perceive moistness in the air, they come out of their holes, beating the air with their wings as if it were the strokes of an oar. They forsake the earth and fly aloft, which wings and spreading. I had to blow this up so you can see sort of a part of it here, but I'll show you more of it here. But that sort of thing. So I got read it all to you, but basically he describes a bunch of sorts of different ones, right? And you can clearly see in so many places, man, the possibility of them all describing the same sorts of things is just not feasible. That was all imagination, right? And I noticed a lot of sort of interesting ones, like you'll see depictions of certain creatures in the books where the person didn't really have a good sort of a look of one available to him, but he was just cataloging them. And you'll see in those kinds of ones that they actually always show them in different sorts of things. But in the dragon ones, there's always like about 6, 7 kinds here. They're all identical, just different sorts of a particular one: legless, 2 legs, 4 legs, wings, no wings, that sort of thing, right? So it's a whole family here, and a few of them could actually fly, and the rest couldn't, right? Or sort of thing like that. So, but every culture in the planet's telling you they either live in the caves or in the waters, right? Sort of the serpentine sorts here. Now look at this. This is very interesting here. This here, this one here, be no more harmful than conqueror or lamprey. Okay, here this is also in the ocean and the big sea. Serpents of 30 to 40 feet long, whose picture is described as it was taken by Olus Magnus, and he further write about it here, right? So if you look at that, that's extremely common in a lot of serpent sightings, including even that one like the Muck Shalash, all kinds of ones worldwide of this snake sort. So what if these people already knew, like, because thousands of years ago here, I mean, it's exactly in the realm. Most of these lake monster lakes or any of the sorts of ones are in this sort of range, 20, 30, 40 feet, 15 feet, you know, and I mean, there's going to be younger, middle age, and older ones, right? But I mean, this, you get the sawtooth sort of stuff you get in so many accounts here. The thing with snake-like head sort of here. This other one was described that was in the particular sorts of areas, and this dude was like over 120 feet long and a similar like one. These great orm serpents, right? And this is just another sort of form of dragon. It's the same sort of thing, right? So it's extremely interesting. But now here, look at here. Here's just one of the other ones that he describes. Now, do you see anything wrong with that? I mean, seriously, there's all kinds of ones in there. There's some that he describes are very strange, like a monkfish. Nobody knows really what that was, right? Or some of these other sort of ones, priest, bishop fish, these sorts of weird ones that sort of like, there's been descriptions and other ones too that I suspect were some kind of strange skates or rays that maybe now uncommon or extinct or were caught by early people in early times. They were a bit more common and they saw them and they described them, right? It was some kind of creature like that that was being the sort of why they would call it, because it looks sort of like that. And I've seen some ones that are undersides almost looks like that a little bit, so very strange. But the thing is that the guy's getting all kinds of animals I can clearly see very accurately. And he talks about how the salves and stuff to make from the dragons and the different things like this. I mean, that's really sort of ridiculous. Now, here the horned serpent in native traditions all over the place. Massive Canadian lakes from Ogopogo to all kinds of ones. Some have horns on them, right? This he's described here and all over the sort of like this, and he's different from the viper because he's got these horns on his head, right? And there's different size ones and different types, but the bottom line is here you have somebody thousands of years ago describing the same sea monster that the natives, the Chinese, and all kinds of other sort of cultures have seen in their bodies of water, right? But yet these people already described them, sort of thing. So we just haven't found modern bodies that somebody will categorically say, yes, that is the horned sea monster, right? So they refuse to do that because even if the body's fresh, they'll try and pass it off, say, well, you know, the body was decaying. We can't make a positive identification, even though they clearly know it's not a whale or anything else. They'll still state that because the guy doesn't want to get in any hassles, right? So there's a lot of sort of silly cover up in that. Like, I mean, there's a lot of people that also don't know their animals at all. I mean, I can't believe how many news broadcasts there's been of killer creature on the beach, and I look at it right away. I know it's a sturgeon, either an Atlantic sturgeon or sometimes they were lake sturgeon or different ones. I mean, I've seen all kinds of them where they're claiming it's a lake mon, and I mean, some of them stay mysterious for months, right? And there's a giant eel film that I cover in the book where the 3/4 of the people keep screaming it's a sturgeon. These people obviously have never seen a sturgeon in their entire life. If that's a sturgeon, what I cover in the book on that film, I would eat a thousand boxes of hats and yeah, you know what I mean, jump off the moon for it. I mean, there's no possible way that that's a sturgeon. The tail structure is completely wrong. It has no sort of, everything about it is a gigantic Angola, so it's not a sturgeon, right? So, I mean, I've been catching them since the first sturgeon I caught, it wasn't even like, 7 years of age, and I caught all kinds of them by the time I was even a preteen by then. Sometimes this fish, that's how common they were in the river back in the early days, because like I said, nobody was fishing them and stuff. You would go in an afternoon, and quite often sometimes with just worms you could hook like 3 or 4 or 5, so a few times over 10 in a sort of a day's time. I mean, so quite good fishing for them back in the day, right? And including some monsters that stripped all the line out of the reel from shore and El Gondo, right? Nothing you can do because you can't sort of stop. Like, I mean, these things are like a train, and they just not, you couldn't stop them no matter what you want to do when you have lighter line and sort of, and you're from shore, you can't get on a boat to catch up to it, right? Sort of thing. So I mean, for sure that sort of there's things out there that are sort of very, very interesting, and there's a lot of sort of mysterious stuff. But this horn-like serpent has been seen in so many lakes and oceans, sort of around the sort of world that. And since you got early scientific people describing them and things like that, I find it sort of bizarre that people will sort of, yeah, you know what I mean, deny that these things existed. Right? Because I can't understand that. Like, I mean, I really don't, because just because we haven't found one in modern sort of times that we could sort of, you know what I mean, analyze, these creatures, of many of them might have been very low even back in ancient times, and they might have been, like I said, there was huge seafarers that would go great distances, but a lot of them sort of fish, you know, just off their shores and things like that. So these whatever creatures that might have been unusual and uncommon back in early times might have been a little bit more common, enough that you caught the odd one to describe them. But then over even sea fishing and everything else, even in early centuries, right? People don't realize that, but I mean, but they, even in earliest times, these guys really, they didn't have refrigeration, so they took what they could, and they would, yeah, you know, move this stuff along like no tomorrow, right? So, and they had big sort of ships and all these kinds of things, and they would process these whales and the different fish species and all these kinds of things. So, you know, to say that some guy writes scientific books, and there's all kinds of these. I'm just covering this one odd little one, and to completely knock it, I can understand some of the creatures in there are weird, and why people would be skeptical of them and things like that. But I think it's because the artist, in a lot of cases, didn't have a sort of any kind of reference. He's just being told what the thing looks like and made a sort of a drawing of what he thought it might look like. So he might have gotten some features wrong, right? But if you notice, the dragon ones worldwide, they're always the same, of the same different groups and things like that, because they were more familiar across the board in the earliest times. He mentions, like, even on the sort of Euphrates River, that it flooded in early times, right? And that so many dragons came out and sort of into the fields and the things like that, that they had to sort of fight and kill with them and all kinds of things. I mean, all kinds of references from all these kinds of people to state this is all imagination, I find insane. So we'll even show you, like I said, later, a possible sort of a dragonish like sort of creature that made it to modern times. Here's an extremely interesting one. In 2011, the strange carcass showed up in a beach near Aberdeen. It was 30 feet long, claimed by so-called experts to be a pilot whale or orca. But there is some issues that the creature, A, has no teeth. He has a nasal-like second cavity, which you can't find on any of these sort of whales here that they're claiming, okay? The actual air breathing is way up near the top, and if you notice, it's a high ridge, okay? On this creature, it actually sinks in and divots there, and they don't have this extra bone-like sort of nose-like structure there, okay? So that's just one of the little aspects. We'll look at a bunch of stuff here. You can clearly see, now they're claiming it's either sort of an orca whale or a pilot whale, okay? So here's some of the things. A, there's a divot in the center. It actually goes way down into the skull instead of high up like that. So that's one thing. The eyes are in similar position, but this creature has no teeth. You can clearly see that, sort of, you would see that, okay? So that's another thing that's interesting. The tail, okay, and I'll show you here, oh no, that's coming up in a bit, but we'll cover this in a bit here. You can see the tail actually has 3 spikes coming out, okay? That's a bit weird, because when you'll see a whale skeleton, it actually doesn't look like that. So that's another sort of interesting thing. So here's a close-up. Okay, so the nostril's up at the top here, okay? Now look at this. Obviously, this is its nostril. You can clearly see there's 2, they got equal sort of these weird sort of ridges up on both sides, and there's 2 holes there. Okay, so that's his nostril and that's his mouth underneath. They don't have such a thing like that. So that's a killer whale here. Okay, that's a pilot whale. So here's the issue too. Besides the no teeth, okay, if you look at the sort of girth of how the frame of these sort of killer whales would come out, okay, look at the difference. Now you can see here that this creature is not fully rotted away in a lot of the spots there, yet he's still equal uniform. So I doubt this creature was much massively thicker there or any of the other spots. He probably was a long sort of thinner like one. Now look at his sort of rib cage here. If you notice, it's very short because it's small, because the creature actually isn't that sort of wide around. So if you're claiming it's this sort of killer whale or a pilot whale, this body frame here should be way more. There should be much more of a rib cage out like that. Okay, that's one sort of thing. But and then also the tail at the end just makes to one point, because the sort of flipper like stuff on the sides here, they sort of, when they fall off, they're not sort of like, there's not all loads of bones in there or anything to sort of then have this sort of side sort of stuff as much coming out of the tail sort of area. Yet here this creature has seemingly like three like spikes, right? All the sort of fossils that I've seen put together only have one spike at the end. So that's another sort of thing. But you can clearly see in the side view that second hump I'm talking about above his mouth that has no teeth, which these other whales that they're claiming that it is do have teeth, right? But not only that, you can clearly see they do not have this center nose ridge, and you can clearly see that's a nose. There's the two side nostrils. You can see the two holes. They're equal, perfect, right across, and they're both at the same sort of angle and everything. I mean, 100%. So this thing, as far as I could ascertain, was not sort of any sort of known whale and sort of thing like that, and definitely interesting. And I mean, even at that, an orca, that's about the maximum they would get. So it had to be a Titanic orca if it was one, okay, because to make it to that sort of length, right? And the pilot whale's even shorter. So this is sort of like, there's a lot of problems here, right? Sort of a thing like that. Some of the things are similar, sort of to them, but then other things are not, right? So it's one of these sort of ones that all I can tell you is the suspects, they're telling you, I can clearly see that this cannot be, like, in the highest probability. There's way too many discrepancies here, right? You now have a breathing nose that shouldn't be there. You have a sunken in top skull area that wouldn't have rotted away first. This flesh would have eaten away way before that center hole would have eaten away in his sort of bone or cartilage or whatever it is, right? Down, then you wouldn't have this giant hole here. That would have taken longer to rot away than the other things. Also, you can see it's uniform, all the rest, sort of like, so the carcass might have been sort of half decayed and stuff, but it could be that a lot of this stuff was bitten off in chunks or whatever as it floated in, and that's why some areas got worse than others. But some sections isn't as rotted and sort of is equal sort of across the board, you know. So anyways, in my opinion, anyways, it's definitely cannot be these species that these guys will pass the buck on. What it is, I can't speculate, but it doesn't. It's definitely more of the, you know, some kind of strange sort of one that would be more in the sea serpentine sort of thing, like, or some kind of primitive, strange sort of whale that breathes in a different area, or something like that, or some kind of ancient lizard, whatever, right? So any kind of strange thing like that is hard to know, right? But here's an ancient one from that was taken massive decades ago. I find this extraordinary. Okay, look, you can clearly see the size of this creature compared to these people around like this. So I would easily guess that you're talking 14, 15 feet anyways, probably in at least that range. Well, you know, bare minimum. I can't imagine any much less than that, okay? There is no creature on this planet that has those diamond like that. You can clearly see they're all perfect. This is not eaten away. This is extremely like ancient old drawings of many sorts of forms of dragons, right? And here, now look at his sort of face here. Okay, I'll get you closer up here. Look at his face. He's got a long, strange beak like sort of face to him. His eyeballs up on the top, on the sides. It actually isn't like where even a whale's would be. It's actually more above on the higher sort of part. But he's got this camel like head, sort of, that you get in so many descriptions of sort of. Some of them showing they had a funny sort of hump on their head, like it was more humpish and sort of thing like that. Sadly, you can't tell whether this creature has teeth or not. It probably does. It may or may not. But whatever the case, it certainly is not a whale. It can't be a sturgeon. Totally impossible. The mouth doesn't open up in a way like that. They don't have a head like that, and it would be tapered different and sort of everything. So you can't pass the sturgeon buck. Plus, they wouldn't even have equal sort of spacing like that, so perfect. You don't usually see sort of that sort of thing. So there's a lot of things that it can't be that. It can't be a whale. Sadly, you don't see any other fins. So it's some kind of like giant, the legless sort of dragons that they would say, right? Because I don't see any place here where there possibly was sort of a leg here. It doesn't. If there was, it might be buried underneath the sand a little bit, like it could be at a lower section or something. I suppose another fin could be down there or something like that. But absolutely one of the most fascinating sort of ones of a real carcass that no way I can identify. Now, in this photograph here, it almost looks like he has some kind of shine in his mouth, so there may be some, but whatever the case, his eyeballs in a different position. It's above sort of the beak line slightly in a different sort of area than what, like I said, whales would have an eye. No whales on Earth, or it's not a crocodile. The head's completely wrong shaped, sort of thing like that. But it's crocodilian, dragonish like, and it matches very, very highly a lot of early descriptions and drawings of a particular species of more common dragon. There was a water dragon that looked like this, and a land one that had, 2 or 4 feet, or even ones that didn't have any feet. That could even be one of them that was also a land one. So whatever the case, just like the descriptions of the early scientists, right? They're telling you there's different kinds. It could have been any one of these, as far as I know. It doesn't look to be a flying one. I don't see any wings sort of area it might add or whatever. So whatever this thing was, it certainly fits more in an ancient crocodilian, dragonish like sort of creature than anything else. It's certainly not a whale. It's not that eaten away yet. It's actually in pretty good, decent shape here, and sort of. And I mean, this ridge on the top is extraordinary. It's very conclusive that, I mean, this isn't random stuff where it just started to rot and its bones started BS. I mean, it's all perfect triangular sort of stuff all along. It's very natural symmetry like stuff here. It's perfect nature, right? So this creature actually had this sort of appendage on it, and there's nothing like that except alligators, crocodiles, these guys, a few ones similar, and none of them sort of would fit with this sort of a head. The beak-like position is different. Also, you should have seen much more bigger crocodile teeth right away, and that sorts of stuff. So I'd say this is a totally unknown sort of, you know what I mean, what you would really call a actual real sea monster of some sort, like a unknown dragonish like sort of thing, right? I mean, absolutely extraordinary. So wonderful sort of, thank goodness this guy found this in some old archival photos here, right? So here's another interesting one that I find extremely interesting. The skeptics are claiming this was found in a beach washed up in England in 2018, and they're claiming it's a whale. There's a lot of problems here with this being a whale, and I mean a lot. Okay, so we'll start to sort of cover this interesting one here. Okay, so here's the thing: turtles do not have teeth on them. Okay, yet this creature clearly does have all kinds of spiked out little sort of weird hagfishish like teeth. Okay, but he has eye positions similar to what a giant turtle's would be, and a beak similar that could be a turtleish like sort of thing. But now here's the key features why this cannot be sort of a whale. It's impossible. Okay, so the rib cages inside, if you look at sort of a lot of the whales, they're actually not sort of perfectly rounded like that. They're different, sort of, they go down, and they should be a bit wider on the body coming across like this. But instead, you got this giant turtle shell. Now you can clearly see that this is equal. This thing's actually breaking off from its skin underneath. Regular turtles, you can't rip it off of them, sort of. It's near impossible, like, to get this sort of. So it takes quite a while to sort of get this off this sort of stuff. So, but you can clearly see it's broken away in lots of parts, and it's equal width across all over the place. Now, look at the giant sort of tail here, okay? You can clearly see that's extremely like a typical back of a sort of a giant turtle or tortoise of some sort would be. And the creature, you're actually seeing the underneath of it sort of flipped up this way. The rougher ridges are sort of on the opposite side, buried underneath. Now look here. I look at this sort of sea turtle here, okay? You can clearly see the same defined line. Even though the shell is slightly different, it doesn't have those two sort of front humps, but I mean, each turtle would have a different sort of a shell on them, right? But you can clearly see it's identical. It has the same ridge-like structure that goes over the sort of flesh here. Exactly what this is doing, okay? So there's absolutely no way that that's a whale. I mean, just complete lunacy. Okay, so so here we go again. You can clearly see the edge of the sort of this whole shell-like thing. Here's the other proof. If it was a whale, whale blubber flops down. It's junky, rubbery. It's all decaying. It rots fast. All that kinds of stuff like this. You can clearly see on the left-hand side of this tortoise monster, whatever this thing is, right? One of his part of his shell somehow got snapped, maybe bitten, maybe some creature attacked him or something, and that's how he got killed. But you can clearly see it standing up at an angle. It's bent. It's extremely rigid, which a turtle shell would be. But whatever this was, that actually it seems to break and apart off of it. And this may be how the creature died, because the rest of it's fully intact, except I find that strange that that one position is up. So it can't be a piece of whale blubber. That's very solid and part of the shell-like material, and it was sort of maybe cracked somehow of some sort or whatever. Maybe some native got the thing. Who knows? Like, whatever the reason, right? But these teeth are the perplexing thing, because no one sort of, at least none I know of, that there could be one out there that I've never heard of. But I mean, just, and here's some other things. If you look at sort of the tail of a normal sort of a turtle here, okay? Now look, I mean, it's extremely similar, and you can even see on the bottom, because this tail is actually sort of upside down a little bit. So if this tail was turned the other way, you can actually see it looks rougher up at the top, and now you're starting to see this sort of stuff on the sides of it probably is way rougher even up at the top of it, right? And because the tail's sort of, the creature's just at a weird angle and he's sort of twisted a bit, right? So the thing is that highly likely that is some sort of a turtle-like sort of tail. I mean, it's identical. They match, you know. So, I mean, to state this as a whale, I find a bit ludicrous. So bottom line, for many reasons, cannot be whale. The teeth are wrong, and whales do not have a shell, and the tail is not eaten away enough to try and pass it off as a whale, and it looks identical to a tortoise or turtle, except they have no teeth, right? So this is the only mystery. So is there some kind of one out there that we don't know about, that's some kind of turtle-like relative species, or possibly a lizard that has a turtle-like shell? I mean, I know my creatures across the world, and a hell of a lot of them, but I mean, I don't know every single sort of one out there. And I mean, there could be some kind of lizards out there that have some kind of a turtle-ish like shell structure. There's possible out there that I've never heard of, who knows? But the thing is that there could be other families besides a turtle that may also develop some kind of odd shell-like thing, and this could be some even more primitive, whatever they want to call it, form or whatever, right? It's like, but whatever this thing was, it certainly like defies sort of. It's not a whale. That was the other thing I forgot to mention. That you can clearly see. Sadly, you can't see on the left-hand side because maybe the legs was bitten away or maybe whatever, right? Or is dug in the sand. But you can even see here that there was a stump and it looks like more clawish. That doesn't look like a fin to me. It looks more like sort of a typical turtles would have some kind of, thicker. The base comes down like a foot here, down more further, and so probably this creature had like probably four legs. It could be that the back ones are buried in there and they're way near the hind sort of area because they would have to be probably. Let's see here. I'll just we'll take a look at something here and. It's hard to know, but it seems here like the legs, right? You would think that I'm trying to envision my mind of sort of like it's very close to the edges here, right? So I just don't have a picture in front of me here that I can sort of analyze that even better. But the thing is that for sure here we can see possibly some kind of foot-like appendage that possibly was one of them. And it's quite feasible the other ones are either buried down there, was bitten off, whatever, chomped the back of this sort of thing and attacked them. Because I suspect this thing was actually attacked, killed. Because that's really, whatever this substance is, it's like a tortoises or turtles. It's quite strong shell-like material. And you can clearly see how rigid it is, and I can even see a line in there, like as if it was cracked. Like so, whatever it was, it's sort of and the tail is 100% like a big sort of snapping turtles or any of them, and the ribs seem a little bit weird to be a whale's, and certainly they don't have any sort of thing like that. You should have seen much. This fin should have been. There should be. There's different things here that's just not adding up, right? And sort of things like that, and so that's the bottom line with it. Is sort of it's certainly a fascinating sort of one here, and it's weird, right? And it doesn't even. I don't see any sort of whole like sort of thing here in the eye position is sort of a bit different than typical, just slightly, not much, but close to a whale's, but more in this sort of a turtle-like range. So, anyways, I'd highly say in the highest probability that that's actually some unknown sort of relative of a turtle that has teeth of some sort, right? So, but whatever it was interesting and sort of and a longer sort of head than typically, and sort of a strange sort of, he's got this crest like sort of thing up on the top of his head, so very strange. Like I can understand why a few of them might have thought of whalish a bit because the face looks a bit whalish in some ways of some of the decayed ones, but these other things just eliminate that. I mean, it's not feasible. So, but here's the greatest proof, one of the top 5 films of all times of a real sea monster. Okay, this is the most extraordinary beast you could possibly just. When I watch this thing, it blows my mind. I mean, it's even better in size than the Serbian monster that I showed you, or the Lochness creature. This is a titan. This thing is terrifying. This was filmed in Florida. Okay, and you could tell this couple that they rented a fishing boat. They always do this, right? Sort of thing like that. And this, it was back in 2013, October 6th. And this couple rented out this sort of a boat, and they went out there. And when they were coming back, they saw this group of manatees, and they wondered why they were all sort of packed up in this sort of area, like as if maybe they were nervous or something. And then all of a sudden, Pachungo, here comes the monster. Now look at this thing. I mean, absolutely frigging astonishing. Absolutely astonishing. I mean, you got sort of like here is it when it comes down. Okay, you can see the great big commotion that it caused like this, right? Yeah, this was filmed in Sanibel, right? Okay, so but the thing is that this couple, you can clearly when when this thing comes up, oh my God, what is that, right? They said that this thing was like about somehow, I don't know how this happened there, but it was supposed to be in here. It seems it got cut out, but I believe, yeah, oh no, so the thing was like about 30 feet long, and they said it had the width of a the length of a cement utility pole. So roughly about the width of it and the length of a cement utility pole, right? But like you can clearly see this creature sort of around it. He's very much eel like. It's not a whale. It's not feasible. I mean, you actually I couldn't catch all the different ones, but you see sort of. And sadly, her camera ran out and they saw better detail. They said the thing had a head like a snake, right? So I mean, it's not a whale here. I mean, there's just absolutely no way. The shape and everything is completely non-whalish. Like it's not a whale, right? And I don't know of any sort of sea creature that sort of could fit into this, except some kind of titanic, unknown sort of eel. I don't believe it's an oarfish. It looks even way too huge to be that. It's very, very rounded, sort of like this. And I mean, the snake like head, and he comes way out of the water. Sort of, that's the whole thing is interesting, right? So I fully believe this couple is, they got one of the best sort of proofs you could find across the world of a truly unknown sort of sea monster. So if you want to check that out, sort of definitely that is one for the sort of record there, sort of thing. So, but I mean, there's a lot of sort of fascinating ones out here that boggle the mind. But I like this one. It's very credible, sort of, and very, very interesting sort of a film, right? Like, I mean, there's too many things about it. I mean, this creature is titanic. You can clearly see with their boat. This is just a small portion of it, and this thing's all over the place. He was feeding of some sort, right? And I mean, they saw him quite well. Like, sadly, some of their camera died out. Or her Apple phone, I think she had, or something, right? So, but I mean, absolutely fascinating, right? So, always goes to show when you're going out on trips or anything like that, carry a backup charger because you don't want to miss the monster. She might have been able to get this clearly because look at how close. I mean, you actually see this creature surface right near them and scare the living heck out of them, right? And so, because they could see off in the distance this weird shadowing something, they kept wondering what it was, and it started getting closer, and then this thing came up, right? Sort of thing like that. But I mean, absolutely, wow, 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 wow. So, one of the most impressive sort of ones that I can't explain. It's not a whale. It's not a porpoise. It's not a sturgeon. It's not a moose. It's not Bigfoot. It's not any of this stuff, right? So now we're into unknown. So it truly is one we can add to the list of an actual real sea monster of unidentified sort of thing, right? Absolutely fascinating. It's definitely not a whale anyway. There's even a part where the two ridges come up, and you can clearly see it is like what they describe, like sort of rounded, sort of like a big pole sort of thing, and it's very eelish, like in a lot of ways, right? So, but sadly, you can't tell whether he's going up and down or side to side. It looks to me sometimes he's going up and down, so he may not be a typical sort of like giant Angola. It could be some eel-like creature that's similar, right? That's these great orms, another great snake, right? But so there's certainly a lot of different sort of fascinating carcasses out there, and some strange films. That's certainly why people are so dubious of it. Like I said, there's some actual real good evidence that's been collected over the last few years that is really hard to push away. And yeah, I'm sure some guy will say this was a motorboat wave or something ridiculous, but you're smoking the local. And speaking of smoking the local, here, Sean Geese found out some interesting updates here. He says that because probably True Glow is going to retire there, maybe if he doesn't make it the next round and stuff like this. So apparently, the True Glow has gotten two Raelians to clone two True Glow clones that have been infused with the voices of Bieber and Dion. The real True Glow center will lip sync, and he's hired Vanilla Halal Rice, a local rapper mime, to make him look like he's really singing. Right? So apparently, rumor has it already with jam practices. Sorry about that. A little bit of a disturbance there for 2 seconds at the door. This real True Glow said here center, he's going to be getting this mime to teach him there, and he's already gotten some groupies. There's 3 groupies he's already got. He's got a former defense man, Big Alol McDaddy, right? And a hooker from Hull, and the Lochness monster. So there they are right there, the Halal warriors, gods of rock. Hey, we're the Lokies. People say we're loking around. so he's got everybody half masked up here and stuff like that, and he's got his important crackers with him and stuff, and apparently he likes this idea because he didn't really want to share the profits with any band members and stuff like that, and these Haloki clones here will sort of do as his machismo wants. So here's what the Lochness monster had to say about it. Nothing than the Alokis gets my feet tapping, and that True Glow is a real rock star. I must admit I have a deep desire to aloco him all night long. All night long. So I'm not sure what aloco means, but it sounds a bit out there. Anyways, rumors have it that True Glow is jealous of the Lochness monster due to he's been offered his own CBC miniseries. It's called The Lilis Halolo, and the story's set in Vanier, Ontario. Called now Halalaville on the show. Just I guess they want to make it a different sounding place. And the Lochness monster wanders around saving random hookers to Alolians. His buddy Obji, who's a Bali boy that he has a special relationship, is a magnificent seamstress and can cook a mean halal poutine and takes care of Big Daddy Halolo. So Halolo meets Obji behind the Parliament buildings each moonlit night, and they bond and they spend evenings howling in the woods in full nature form and other secret activities. Apparently, once he reaches 16, that's going to be the end of the show, and and apparently it's quite touching from sort of the ones that have seen previews of it. So the Lochness monster is going to have his own series here, and so they're claiming this isn't a ripoff of the Lilis Hobo, but I don't know. You make your decision here. It says here's their song. There is a halal approved voice that keeps on calling me. Down the Lavagny Road, that's where I'll always be. Every stop I make a new friend. Some of the Bally boys, if nothing's around, I'll give them a good stiff reefer now and then. Maybe tomorrow I'll want to settle down with 4 wives and finally get some halal dinners now. So if you want to join me for a mega joint for a while, just grab my beard and stroke it hobo style. Maybe tomorrow I'll want to settle down, but until that tomorrow, I'll just keep lolling on. So it sounds like a great show. He's going to run around, and help out the poor sort of the citizens of Lullabill, Vanier. Right? Give them free crackers and sort of, save them from sort of things like that. any kind of mischief, the muggers out there and all that sorts of stuff like that. And I mean, he's a nice, friendly guy. He's just going to leap around and share a cracker with you and sort of disappear and go on his way. So I could understand. I mean, I bet you that'll get watched way more than even Little Mosque on the Prairie was, or some of the other ones. So this is what Jean Guy claims that True Glow could be up to in the future there. So I think that's a great show there, and sounds very sort of wholesome family sort of fun here, right? Saving the poor man from Banyay, right? So and I mean, Jean Guy lives there, so I mean, he might run into Jean Guy and give him a few free crackers, right? So who knows? but anyways, all kidding aside here, if science is right here, I just wanted to talk about this for a minute. We've been here millions of years. Then early Bigfoot caveman to early Big Brother UFOs saw mystery beasts, and likely they had interactions with early life forms of different sea monsters as we claim to today. Must have been rough for the earliest Bigfoot to learn to swim and then attacked by sea monsters or giant anglerfish, tempting their poor caveman minds. so in these, according now, their newest science, we're 25 million years old. So one of our earliest sort of ones that could be a Bigfoot where he hasn't advanced yet, that this poor guy 25 million years ago might have seen something. Like, he's certainly seen the coelacanth. He's still floating around, right? And there's a few reports over the ages of people seeing like a gigantic angler-like fish, right? So I like that one. I wouldn't doubt there's such a thing like a Titanic one. You know what I mean? Like 20, 30 feet long or something like this, and the guy's got his glowing fishing rod. I would love that. Fisherman versus fisherman, get him to sort of scrap bite on it, right, and reel that dude in, and then he tries and hooks me with this sort of his own fishing line. There's some really bizarre anglerfish. I mean, some of them even got a line-like sort of device at the end. I mean, the weirdest sort of stuff, right? There's many kinds of them, eh? But absolutely fascinating creatures. But there's certainly a lot of strange water monsters out there, from dragons and all kinds of things. And these prehistoric coelacanth to all kinds of other ones, you know what I mean, have survived up into these times. So it's very feasible. And as I showed you at many shows, but I love flashing this one, just like the skeptics love flashing the Stegosaurus-like creature on that temple, trying to claim it's a moose and everything else. Because that's the only one they can pick on that they could sort of really give a more of a convincing case on it. And just like this one, this is the most convincing case of a sea monster in human history, right? It was not a whale. It's got gills. It was fully still fresh. The eye was even fully still intact, right? It had a fin structure completely sort of a different here. He has gigantic sort of back fins here, which the whales sort of don't have, right? He's got dragon scales on him, and the thing was monstrous. He's way bigger than any sort of seal or any of the other sorts of crapola that people could try and pass on. And he truly was one of these ancient sort of, you know what I mean, dinosaurian like monster fish that even Megalodon would probably poop his pants from half the time. So this guy was the boss. I wonder, if it had been me, I wish I had a time machine, because that's the first place on earth I would go to, is to see this dude when he had appeared on the beach, so that I could go up and sort of remove a few of its teeth, right? And then say that and match it up with every sort of whale species on the planet and every other known thing out there, and then stick it up the rectum of science, right? Because that would prove that obviously there can't be the same even creature just from that, and sort of collect some of its scales and some of the other stuff. But truly it was a gigantic fish of some sort, right? And he may add some kind of olfactory organ up here in the front area somewhere, but you can't see it. It's sort of the scales cover it and everything. But he wasn't that rotted away, completely tapered like a sort of giant dragon-like monster, right? So, I mean, one of the greatest finds in human history. The other one, the Tukalatla bees, and a few other ones out there. Some I covered here are pretty sort of convincing as well. But certainly this one has the best case of any in human history. I mean, how anybody could suggest it's anything else, a sturgeon, a moose, or anything, again, you're smoking major local. so, anyways, stay tuned for another show there. We'll get some more sort of sea monsters and things like that. But just wanted to show you a few interesting carcasses out there that a lot of skeptics, that you'll notice they won't use real good ones, because they always will show you a blubber one that's half eaten away from whales and all that kind, like these kinds, to give people always the skeptical things. They'll never cover a skeptical objection to real good ones, because they know that anybody reading it's going to laugh at them, right? So like even more uneducated people of science still probably won't believe. Like if somebody said here that, as a for instance, said, no, I believe this is a seal. I mean, obviously even the most, lack of knowledge of animal life and stuff like that might have seen a seal once in a TV show or something, and could probably figure out that that isn't one. So anyways, there's a lot of things, like I said, skeptics use, but bottom line, there certainly is some mysterious creatures out there, and not all of them are sort of, like what they claim, sort of, whale blubber, or Bigfoot's mother, or all this kinds of stuff, right? Like, so there certainly is some fascinating creatures out there, and some definite finds of real science where these things were mysteries, sort of creatures that should have been identified, that to pass the time here, sadly. So stay tuned for next show, and bye for now.